Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more English story. Narrated by Mr. Lewis. A retired teacher speaking to a group of young adults at a community center. This story is both motivational and practical, highlighting the importance of valuing time in today's fast-paced world. As the room settled, Mr. Lewis walked to the center of the stage. His kind eyes scanned the audience before he began. I want to share something with you today, a lesson it took me decades to learn. The value of time. You see, when I was your age, I thought time was infinite. There was always tomorrow for my dreams, later for apologies, and someday for the life I wanted to build. But life doesn't wait, and time never stops. He paused, then smiled gently. Let me tell you about my younger self. Back then, I had big dreams of becoming a writer. I loved stories, and I wanted to create ones that inspired people. But instead of writing, I spent my days procrastinating. I binge-watch TV, scroll through social media, and tell myself, I'll start tomorrow. Tomorrow turned into next week, and then next year. One day, I met an older colleague, Mr. Grant. He was nearing retirement and shared his regrets with me. He said, Lewis, do you know what the saddest words are? They're what if. What if I'd started that business? What if I'd spent more time with my kids? What if I hadn't waited? Mr. Grant's words stayed with me, but I didn't act on them right away. I continued wasting time. It wasn't until a life-changing event shook me that I finally understood the urgency of valuing every moment. The audience leaned in, intrigued. One day, I received a call from my mother. My father, who had always been strong and healthy, had fallen seriously ill. For years, I thought, I'll visit them next summer. But that summer never came. By the time I rushed home, I had missed so many moments, his laughter, his stories, his advice. That experience taught me two things. Time waits for no one, and the people you care about won't always be there. From that day forward, I decided to take control of my time. I began writing, even if it was just a paragraph a day. I made it a priority to call my family every week. And do you know what happened? My life began to change. By valuing my time, I not only achieved my dream of writing a book, but I also strengthened my relationships and created memories I'll cherish forever. Mr. Lewis's voice softened as he leaned closer to the microphone. Let me share a few lessons I learned along the way. Lessons I wish someone had told me when I was younger. 1. Time is your most valuable asset. Money can be earned back. Material things can be replaced. But time? Once it's gone forever. Every hour you spend scrolling mindlessly or waiting for the perfect moment is an hour you'll never get back. So ask yourself, is this how I want to spend my time? If not, change it. 2. Start small. But start now. You don't need to overhaul your life overnight. Start with 10 minutes a day working on something meaningful, whether it's exercising, learning a skill, or simply spending time with loved ones. Over time, those small efforts compound into big results. 3. Prioritize what matters. Think about what truly brings you joy and fulfillment. Is it spending time with your family? Pursuing a hobby? Helping others? Once you know your priorities, protect your time fiercely. Say no to distractions and yes to what aligns with your values. 4. Forgive yourself for wasted time. But don't repeat it. Look, we've all wasted time. Don't beat yourself up over it. What's important is that you learn from those moments and make better choices moving forward. Today is your chance to start fresh. 5. Create memories, not regrets. In the end, it's not the hours you worked or the money you earned that you'll remember. It's the moments you shared with loved ones, the adventures you took, and the dreams you pursued. Make those memories count. Mr. Lewis looked at the audience, his voice steady and warm. The truth is, valuing time doesn't mean being busy every minute. It means being intentional. It means living fully, without putting off what truly matters. So I'll leave you with this. Don't wait for the perfect time. It doesn't exist. The perfect time to start, to apologize, to dream, to live, is now. Don't let what if become part of your story. As the audience applauded, many of them wiped tears from their eyes, inspired by Mr. Lewis's heartfelt message. They left the seminar not just with words of wisdom, but with a newfound determination to make every moment count. Moral of the story: time is our most precious gift. By valuing it, we can create a life filled with purpose, joy, and meaningful connections. Don't wait for the right moment. Live intentionally and start now. The room fell silent as Mr. Lewis poured himself a glass of water. He smiled warmly, seeing the faces in front of him, each one holding on to his words as if they were gold. After a brief pause, he continued, "You know, Mr. Lewis began, understanding the value of time isn't just about realizing it's limited. It's about learning how to use it wisely. After my father's illness, I made a promise to myself. I would stop waiting for the perfect time to live my life. But making that decision was only the beginning. Actually following through? That was the real challenge." He leaned forward, his tone becoming more conversational. "I had to unlearn so many bad habits. I was the king of procrastination. If there was something important to do, I could find a million excuses to delay it. Can anyone here relate?" A few hands went up, and the audience chuckled softly. Breaking the cycle of procrastination. Let me tell you about a day that changed my perspective on procrastination. I had always dreamed of writing a book. For years, the idea was there, sitting in the back of my mind, but I never acted on it. I would tell myself, I'll start when I have more free time. Of course, that time never magically appeared. One evening, I was sitting on my couch, flipping through channels, when I stumbled across an interview with an author I admired. She said something that hit me like a ton of bricks. The hardest part of writing a book is starting. If you wait for inspiration, you'll be waiting forever. But if you force yourself to write, even when you don't feel like it, you'll be amazed at what you can create. That night, I closed my laptop and opened a notebook. I didn't overthink it, I just started writing. First, it felt awkward and forced, but I kept going. 15 minutes turned into 30, and before I knew it, I had written 2 full pages. They weren't perfect, but they were a start. He smiled at the audience. That small step, just picking up the pen, was the beginning of something incredible. Over the next year, I wrote every day. Some days, it was only a sentence. Other days, it was several pages. But by the end of that year, I had a finished manuscript. Small steps lead to big changes. You see, Mr. Lewis continued. Most of us think we need to make massive changes overnight to achieve our goals. But that's not true. Progress happens in small, consistent steps. When I committed to writing just a little bit every day, I built momentum, and that momentum carried me forward. He glanced at a young man in the front row. What's your name? James. The man replied. James, do you have a goal you've been putting off? James hesitated before nodding. I want to start my own business, but I keep waiting for the right time. Mr. Lewis nodded knowingly. I've been there. James, let me ask you this. What's one small step you could take today to move closer to that goal? James thought for a moment. I could research business ideas or talk to someone who's already done it. Exactly, Mr. Lewis said. It doesn't have to be big. Just has to be something. The key is to start, even if it feels uncomfortable or scary. Learning to say no. Another important lesson I learned about valuing time is knowing when to say no. For most of my life, I was a people pleaser. If someone needed help moving, I was there. If someone wanted to vent for hours, I'd listen. Even if it drained me, I said yes to everything because I didn't want to disappoint anyone. But saying yes to everything meant I had no time for myself, my dreams, my health, my happiness, they all took a back seat. One day, I hit a breaking point. A friend called me, asking for a favor, and I felt a wave of resentment. I didn't want to do it, but I couldn't bring myself to say no. As I was driving to help him, I realized I wasn't angry at him, I was angry at myself. That moment was a wake-up call. I started practicing the art of saying no, not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect. When I said no to things that didn't align with my values, I freed up time and energy for what truly mattered. Making time for what matters, Mr. Lewis's expression softened. Do you know what I discovered when I started prioritizing my time? I found room for the things that bring me joy. I reconnected with old friends, spent more time with my family, and pursued hobbies I'd forgotten about. One of my favorite memories is from a summer evening a few years ago. I was sitting on the porch with my mother, watching the sunset. She turned to me and said, "It's been so long since we've done this." That moment reminded me that life is made up of simple, beautiful moments like these. But we miss them when we're too busy or distracted to notice. Facing regrets without fear. As I stand here today, I'll be honest with you, I have regrets. I regret the years I spent procrastinating. I regret the moments I missed with loved ones. But instead of dwelling on those regrets, I use them as fuel to make better choices now. Regret can be a powerful teacher if you let it. It's not about punishing yourself for the past. It's about learning from it and moving forward. Time is a gift, Mr. Lewis looked around the room, his voice steady and sincere. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's this. Time is the greatest gift you have. Use it wisely. Spend it with the people you love. Invest it in your dreams. And most importantly, don't wait. Don't wait to say I love you. Don't wait to start that project. Don't wait to live the life you've always wanted. The audience sat in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. Each of you has the same 24 hours in a day. How you choose to spend them is up to you. My hope is that you'll use them to create a life you're proud of, a life with no what-ifs. The applause was slow at first but quickly grew louder. As Mr. Lewis stepped off the stage, he saw something in the audience that filled him with hope, determination. He had shared his story, and now it was up to them to write their own. The applause had barely died down when Mr. Lewis stepped off the stage. He felt the familiar rush of excitement that came with sharing his journey. But this time, there was something different. This time, he knew that the real impact wasn't made by his words alone. It was made by how the audience would take those words and apply them to their own lives. As he walked backstage, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a message from his old friend, Sarah. "Hey, I've been thinking about your seminar. It made me realize I've been wasting so much time. I'm going to change that. Starting today." A smile tugged at Mr. Lewis's lips. He tapped out a quick reply. "That's amazing, Sarah. It's never too late to start. Just take one step at a time." He put the phone away and sat in his dressing room, reflecting on his journey. For so many years, he had been trapped in the cycle of wasting time, waiting for the perfect moment. And now, here he was, speaking to a room full of people who were ready to take their lives into their own hands. But it hadn't always been this way. The turning point. Mr. Lewis leaned back in his chair, his thoughts wandering to the moment when everything began to shift. It was a cold winter evening, years ago. And he was sitting at his kitchen table. The pile of work in front of him was overwhelming. Bills, emails, personal projects, all of it felt like a mountain he would never climb. He had been postponing things for weeks, thinking he could catch up later. But later never came. He stared at the clock on the wall, its ticking echoing in the silence. Time was slipping away, and he wasn't doing anything about it. That's when it hit him. Why am I waiting? He asked himself aloud. Why am I putting off the things that matter most? It was as if a light had flickered on inside his mind. He realized that the constant waiting, the procrastination, wasn't just about tasks, it was a habit he had formed in every aspect of his life. Waiting for the perfect time to start, waiting for the right moment to act, had been his excuse for avoiding discomfort. He stood up, suddenly feeling the urgency of the moment. I can't wait anymore, he told himself. I have to take control of my time. He didn't have it all figured out, but he knew that taking action was the only way to break free from the endless cycle. He picked up the phone and called a mentor of his, an older gentleman who had always encouraged him to stay disciplined with his time. John, I need your help, he said. I'm tired of waiting. I want to be more intentional with my time, but I don't know where to start. John's response was simple but powerful. Start with today. Daniel, stop waiting for tomorrow. You can't control everything, but you can control what you do right now. The first step. The next day. Mr. Lewis woke up early, earlier than usual, and made a decision. He was going to tackle one thing that had been on his to-do list for far too long. Writing a chapter of the book he had always dreamed of completing. He sat at his desk and stared at the blank page. His thoughts swirled, and his mind wanted to run away from the discomfort. But he remembered what John had said. Start with today. So, he began typing. First, the words were clumsy, the sentences choppy. But he kept going. 15 minutes later, he had written a full page. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of accomplishment. He hadn't waited for inspiration to strike, he had created it. He had stopped waiting for the perfect moment and made the moment perfect by taking action. That evening, he reflected on what had happened. He had broken through the barrier of inaction. And that felt better than anything he had ever waited for. Embracing consistency. As weeks went by, Mr. Lewis developed a routine. Every morning, he would wake up, make a plan for the day, and commit to taking at least one meaningful step forward. Whether it was tackling a work task or making time for a personal connection, he started to fill his days with intention. He didn't always feel motivated. Some days, he had to fight through procrastination and self-doubt. But he had learned to push past those feelings. Recognizing that action came first, emotion followed. One of the most powerful realizations he had during this time was that it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being consistent. It was about showing up for his life, even on the days when he didn't feel like it. "I'm not trying to be perfect," he would tell himself. "I'm just trying to make progress." And slowly, day by day, he did, helping others find their path. Now, as he stood before the crowd at the seminar, Daniel felt a sense of peace that had once eluded him. He knew that the road to valuing time wasn't easy, but it was worth it. He wasn't just speaking from theory, he was speaking from experience. He looked out at the audience and saw the same look he had once had on his own face. Uncertainty mixed with hope. They were ready to make a change. And he was there to remind them that they had the power to do it. "Remember," he said, "you can't wait for time to be on your side. You have to make time work for you. It's never about waiting for the perfect moment. The moment is now. So, what will you do with it?" The room was silent for a moment before a wave of applause filled the space. Daniel stood there, humbled. As the applause washed over him, he had shared his story. And in doing so, he had helped others take the first step toward mastering their own time. The journey wasn't over for him. It wasn't over for anyone in that room. But they had all learned an invaluable lesson. Time is the one thing we can never get back. So we must make every moment count. And with that realization, the turning point had been made. After the seminar, Daniel couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. The energy in the room had been palpable, filled with people ready to take action and change their lives. But as he left the event and walked through the quiet streets of the city, his mind began to reflect on what had happened. It wasn't just about the seminar. It wasn't just about the people he had inspired. It was about the shift in his own life. The way he had transformed his approach to time. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was the beginning of a new way of living with purpose. Creating a life of purpose. A few days after the seminar, Daniel was sitting in his favorite coffee shop, sipping on his usual espresso and watching people rush by. It struck him how fast everyone was moving. Yet so many of them seemed to be going nowhere. The hustle of everyday life often meant running from one task to the next, from one deadline to the next. But most people weren't stopping to ask themselves, what am I truly doing with my time? He'd been there once. He had lived his life like that, constantly busy, but not truly productive. The change didn't come from more work or more activity. It came from purposeful action. Daniel made a promise to himself that he would not let time slip away again. Every task, every conversation, every opportunity was now a chance to live intentionally. He knew that if he continued to live with purpose, time would no longer feel like a ticking clock, it would feel like a gift. The impact of small habits. Living with purpose didn't mean taking on everything at once. In fact, Daniel learned that small, consistent habits were the key to lasting change. Every day, he made time for reflection, whether it was through journaling, walking, or simply sitting in silence. He took moments throughout the day to check in with himself, to see if the tasks he was working on aligned with his values and goals. He also started setting clear intentions for each week, organizing his time in a way that allowed him to focus on what truly mattered. Whether it was dedicating time to personal development, spending quality moments with loved ones, or carving out space for creative projects, Daniel began to make decisions based on his core values, rather than distractions or pressures from the outside world. One morning, while meditating, he realized just how powerful it was to slow down. It wasn't about doing more, it was about doing less, but doing it with greater focus and intention. He had learned to let go of the distractions and noise that once filled his days, making room for what truly mattered. Living with awareness. Over time, Daniel noticed that living with purpose had a ripple effect. It wasn't just his productivity that improved, it was his entire outlook on life. He began to experience a greater sense of inner peace. Tasks that once felt overwhelming now felt manageable. Conversations that once felt shallow became more meaningful. He wasn't living to rush from one thing to the next, he was present in each moment, giving it the attention it deserved. This sense of mindfulness permeated his relationships as well. He started giving more of his time to the people who mattered most. Not in a hurried, distracted way, but with full attention. Whether it was a quick text to check in or a long, thoughtful conversation over coffee, Daniel was becoming more intentional about how he spent his time with others. He also realized the importance of saying no. In the past, he had been so afraid of disappointing others that he would overcommit, leaving little time for himself. Now, he learned that saying no wasn't about rejecting people, it was about valuing his time and creating the space to focus on what aligned with his purpose. The ongoing journey. Months passed, and Daniel's life continued to evolve. He knew there was still much to learn, but he had come to understand that time wasn't something to be feared or rushed through. It was something to be embraced, something to be used with intention and respect. His relationship with time had changed. Instead of seeing it as a limited resource to be consumed, he saw it as an opportunity to build something meaningful. Each day was now a chance to create something of value, whether it was through his work, his relationships, or his personal growth. At his next seminar, Daniel spoke about the importance of living in alignment with one's values, about making conscious choices with the time you have. He shared how living intentionally had brought him a sense of peace and fulfillment that he had never known before. As he spoke, he could see the audience nodding, understanding what he meant. He could feel the energy shift in the room as people began to take in the truth. That time wasn't a burden, it was a privilege. The more aware they became of how they used it, the more control they gained over their own lives. The true value of time. As the final words of his speech echoed in the room, Daniel took a moment to pause. He thought about the long journey he had been on, the moments of doubt, the moments of clarity. He thought about how time, once his enemy, had become his greatest ally. Time, Daniel said, his voice steady, is the most valuable resource we have. It's not something you wait for. It's something you create with every choice you make. Use it wisely, and it will create a life you love. But waste it, and it will slip away before you even realize it. The audience sat in silence, taking in his words. It was a quiet moment, but in that room, something had shifted. A seed had been planted, and for many, it would take root and grow into a life lived with greater purpose and intention. As Daniel stepped off the stage, he knew that the journey was far from over. But in that moment, he felt peace. He had mastered the art of valuing time. And now, he was passing that wisdom on to others. Time was his most precious gift, and he had learned to use it not just for success, but for fulfillment. It wasn't about filling every minute, it was about filling every minute with meaning. And that, Daniel knew, was the true value of time. As the weeks passed since the seminar, Daniel continued to integrate his newfound wisdom into his everyday life. Time, once a source of anxiety and pressure, had now become his most valued asset. The more he practiced mindfulness, the more he noticed its effects in other areas of his life. He wasn't just more productive, he was happier, more fulfilled, and more at peace. Daniel had come to realize that the true value of time lies in how you spend it, not just in how much you accumulate. Each moment had the potential to shape the future, to build meaningful relationships, and to make a positive impact in the world. The more he focused on using his time intentionally, the more he saw how small actions could ripple outward, affecting not only his own life but the lives of others. Shifting priorities. One of the most significant changes Daniel noticed was in his relationships. He had always been the type of person who felt the pressure to stay busy, to constantly be working or achieving. But now, with a clearer sense of purpose, he made more room for the people who truly mattered to him. He started setting boundaries with work, making sure that he dedicated quality time to his family, friends, and himself. No longer did he feel like he was rushing through conversations or missing important moments. Instead, he was present, truly engaged, and attentive. He realized that those moments, whether they were shared with a friend over coffee or with his partner during a quiet evening at home, were just as valuable, if not more so, than any task on his to-do list. His relationships deepened, and he felt a sense of connection that had been missing in his previous, busier life. And as he shared his new perspective on time with those close to him, they, too, began to shift their priorities, making time for what really mattered. The impact on his work. Daniel's work life also transformed. No longer was he scrambling to meet deadlines or constantly feeling overwhelmed by an endless list of tasks. Instead, he learned to focus on one thing at a time, giving it his full attention and effort. With each task, he asked himself, does this align with my values? Does it serve my purpose? This shift in mindset allowed Daniel to be more creative, productive, and effective in his work. He didn't just work harder, he worked smarter. By valuing his time and setting clear boundaries, he freed up mental and emotional space to focus on the work that truly mattered. And when he did that, the results followed. He found joy and pride in his work. Not just the external rewards or accolades. But it wasn't just about him. As he shared his story with others, Daniel began to see how his advice was inspiring those around him to take control of their time. 2. Colleagues at work began to manage their time more effectively, and friends and family members reached out to thank him for reminding them to slow down and savor the moments they often overlooked. The ripple effect. Creating a legacy. As Daniel continued to value his time, he began to realize something profound. The way he spent his time wasn't just about personal fulfillment, it was about creating a legacy. The impact of his actions rippled outward, influencing not just his own life but the lives of everyone he interacted with. He wasn't just making better use of his time. He was showing others how to do the same. Whether through his workshops, personal conversations, or the small actions he took each day, Daniel was spreading a message. Time is precious, and it's up to you to use it wisely. At one point, Daniel received a message from a young woman named Sarah, who had attended one of his seminars months earlier. She shared how his words had inspired her to reconsider how she was spending her time. She had quit a job that drained her energy and had started focusing on her passion for writing. She was now writing daily, spending time with loved ones, and taking better care of herself. Sarah credited Daniel's seminar with helping her realize that life wasn't about chasing after success. It was about finding fulfillment in the present moment. This message warmed Daniel's heart. It was proof that the simple act of valuing time had a ripple effect, changing lives and encouraging others to live with purpose. The ongoing journey. As Daniel reflected on all he had learned, he knew that this journey was far from over. The quest to value time was ongoing, and it required constant mindfulness. But with each passing day, he was more confident in his ability to make each moment count. He had learned that time wasn't something to be managed, it was something to be cherished. It was not just about squeezing more productivity out of each day, it was about savoring the richness of life, being present with those you love, and investing in the things that truly matter. Daniel understood that life was short, but it was also beautiful. And how you chose to spend your time determined how you experienced it. As he continued to inspire others, Daniel was filled with gratitude. He had discovered the true value of time, not in the hours or minutes, but in the purpose and intention behind each one. And that, he realized, was the key to living a life full of meaning and fulfillment. He wasn't perfect, and there would still be challenges ahead. But Daniel knew one thing for sure. Time was a gift, and he was determined to use it in the best way possible. The final message. Standing in front of his audience at his next seminar, Daniel smiled as he looked out at the crowd. The room was filled with eager faces, many of them eager to learn how to make the most of their time. He paused for a moment before speaking, taking in the faces before him. Then, he said, Time is a gift. It's not something you chase, it's something you create. What you do with it today will shape your tomorrow. Choose wisely, live intentionally, and make every moment count. The room was silent for a moment, and then the applause began. Daniel felt a deep sense of peace as he realized that this message, this truth, had already begun to spread far beyond the seminar. He had learned the value of time, and now he was helping others do the same. The ripple effect of valuing time was unstoppable, and he was proud to be a part of it. Moral. Time is our most precious resource. How we choose to spend it shapes the course of our lives. Live intentionally. Focus on what truly matters. And savor every moment. I'm so glad you spent this time with me. If you like the story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Take care. And see you next time.